The Dave Stevens awakening in the comic book community sent a ton of independent comic books with good girl cover art soaring throughout the comic market. But there's definitely one book that not too many people talked about. And that is Vampirella: A Scarlet Thirst, the trade paperback. Now this is just an honorable mention. You might be saying, hey, it's a trade paperback, it's not a comic. Let's not forget what this comic journal sold for. Now this gorgeous trade paperback sells on average between $10 and $60 in high grade. And as amazing of a cover as this is on a very, very popular comic book character, I can't believe nobody ever talked about this. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Paper Chase channel. My name's John. I make YouTube videos that help people in their comic collecting journey. So this is an extremely fun one, and I think we can maybe learn something from this video, not only about the value or the potential money value of this, but why I feel that these comic books are undervalued in a sense of they should be admired more amongst the comic community for different reasons. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that 90% of the people that watch this video will find at least one or two comics on this list that they've never even heard of, and we're going to spread the word here today. First, got to give credit where credit's due. This is a tag video, and this was started by Dave at Still Only 35 Cents YouTube channel. So thanks to him for starting this tag video, and then also special thanks to my buddy Colossus Collector, who has a great YouTube channel. He's the one that tagged me, so thank you. Let's jump into the list. So number 5 on this list is Fantastic Four Annual number 5. This book right here was printed in 1967. It's got the iconic Jack Kirby cover art and interiors. It's got multiple stories on the interior, but the one that goes often underlooked and never spoken about is the first ever solo Silver Surfer story. Now, there are areas where I do think that this book is priced correctly, but mainly the raw comic form I feel like is pretty underpriced. Raw comic prices on this see anywhere between $30 to $60. This book was printed in 1967. It's square bound and it's an all-white cover. A raw $30 to $60 for mid to high grade copies I think is way underpriced. And then you have a recent sale on eBay for a CGC 9.0 for only $225. I think once this book breaks past the 8.0 mark, you should be looking at a $350 book and up. But there is another comic strip in here, drawn by Jack Kirby, that is about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and how they come up with the plots for their comic books. I thought that was pretty interesting and cool. But here it is, Fantastic Four Annual 5, first solo Silver Surfer story, Undervalued. Number 4 on the list. I've talked about this in a video before, and this is Shatter number 1, the very first computerized comic book. Guys, one thing to keep in mind in comic books, we give a lot of clout and value to the characters and the storylines inside of the comics, which of course they are stories, and that's what needs to be happening. Completely get it. But I feel like what's not talked about and valued just as much or equally is the history of the comic book hobby and the community itself. This book here, being the very first comic book on a computer, is huge. This whole thing from front cover to the interiors was drawn on a Macintosh. I would say that probably most, if not all, comic books that get in our hands today were drawn, modified, colored on a computer, which makes this book a pioneer in the modern comic world. Now, how undervalued is this book here? Well, there are only 8 copies total graded. There are no CGC 9.8s. And there are no sales. That is how little of a shit people give about the very first comic book created on a computer. It's groundbreaking. It is. Number 3 on the list is huge. I don't hear people talking about it enough. This book literally changed the way that comic book storytelling was made, and it started in 1955 with Impact number 1. And it contains a famous pre-code horror story called Master Race. Master Race story is about a retired Nazi officer and his hallucinations and paranoia from all of his crimes that he committed during World War II. It is what the artist Bernard Krechstein did on the interiors of this comic book that completely changed things from this book going forward. So here's what I want you to keep in mind. Before this comic book in here, the storyboard of how panels were displayed to the reader was very bland. It was basically a lot of squares and rectangles with a ton of word bubbles. Bernard Krechstein was the first person that actually used imagery and thought of the comic book as through the lens of a film director and would tell the action of the story by his drawing panels. And there's one page in particular where he just changed the game and did things differently. It's in this panel right here where Bernard Krechstein decided to show the officer as he falls onto the train tracks a frame-by-frame sequence. This gives the reader a feeling of a slow motion movement, like if you're watching a movie. This was never done ever. And it's kind of hard to even grasp and think about this, but when you see this, it looks natural because these are how a ton of comics are drawn nowadays. To look at this panel and know that this was the first time that anybody ever told a story in a comic book this way is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. For recent sales, you have July, a CGC 2.5, sold for only $180. There are pre-code horror comics out there in a 2.5 that have no historical comic significance that sell for more money than what this sold for. A CGC 8.5 sold for $930. The fact that this historical comic book in an 8.5 sold for under $1,000 is completely mind-blowing. And no, I don't have this, but you better be damn sure it's on my list. Number 2 on the list is one that is starting to get into the ears of collectors, and I think we're about to hit its turning point, but we're not quite there yet. Most can agree one of the most amazing, talented comic book artists in modern day is Alex Ross, which is why number 2 on the list is Terminator: The Burning Earth, number 1, the very first Alex Ross comic book art. Now this book here is like an airplane struggling to get off the ground, but the kicker here is raws of this book sell consistently under $10. This was produced by Now Comics and it came out in March of 1990. The fact that raw newsstand high grades sell for under $10 is mind-blowing. Think of how many Venom Lethal Protectors in a newsstand high grade sell for. That book is so massively printed and so it's a picture of what the 90s was, right? But think about the supply and demand of that book. And I guarantee you there's more of those on eBay than there are of these. This right here is a book that I 100% believe in. I've had multiple copies of this, and I've sold multiple copies. Just to implement one more sale into the comic book market, I did sell this book signed by Alex Ross in a CGC 9.8 newsstand, just like this one right here. I did sell this book for $400 at a Comic-Con, and I thought that was a pretty fair price, but the person that bought it understood the value of it, and they had no problem dishing out that money. As big of an artist as Alex Ross is, this book should be talked about more and sought after more. This is my last copy, and it's not for sale. And finally, the number 1 most undervalued comic book on my list. Old Man Skywalker, the 2019 Ashcan. What the hell is this, you might say? Well, let me tell you. Very important. In a time where Star Wars damn near euthanized by corporation, by lack of social awareness, there exists the true path that should have been taken, done by Daniel Warren Johnson. Daniel Warren Johnson's art and storytelling is wonderful. And the fact that he took his 100% fan fiction and went his own way with the Star Wars universe says that this is the true Rise of Skywalker. These books were written, illustrated, and published by Daniel Warren Johnson, folded together and hand stapled. This comic book is the antithesis to what the current Star Wars franchise is at. Luke in this book is badass. He is so powerful. Semi-spoiler alert, but in this book, Luke by hand reassembles a galactic star cruiser and sends it hurling down to crash onto his Sith rival that he's fighting in this issue here. It's very short, sweet. There's no words at all. It's all done by art. Thank you, this guy. So in a world when almost the entire fan base is giving the middle finger back to Disney and Star Wars, this is the goods. This is the shit. I would rather hear how this universe came to be than the stuff we got. This is great. The fact that we have a true independent ash can comic book about one of the most famous pop culture icons in history, you would think it would sell for more. A 9.8 sold in February, signed by Daniel Warren Johnson for under $300. But raws, when they do come about on this, sell for an average between $50 and $80. Now, from what I know, which is very little about the availability of this comic, is that he hand assembles them, staples them, and gives them out at Comic-Cons. There is no current print count on this. I don't know. I know that there's not a ton of them out there, and I can say by how the comic is created and the very idea of what this comic is, it's pure fan fiction, handmade to share with the community. There's not going to be a whole lot of them out there either. And the more that the Star Wars franchise just descends into the seventh layer of hell, this book is just getting better and better and better. Got some tags to throw out. I don't know. I can't think of many that Colossus didn't name off the top of my head. So there they are, my 3 tags for this challenge here. 100% value is more than just money. But very often they relate. Supply and demand. It's how commerce works. I hope you found this list helpful, entertaining, and go out and chase down some of these books. See you on the next page.